Let's get to know Andrew Hollis. Last TV show you binged?
The Witcher.
Favourite radio station?
Oh, crikey. Maybe The Rock or The Edge, or Radio Hauraki.
Favourite music genre?
Rock.
Beer or wine or kombucha?
Beer.
PC or Mac?
Mac.
Council or commissioners?
Council.
Drive yourself or take public transport?
Drive myself.
Favourite evening meal you cook yourself?
Steak.
When was the last time you cleaned your toilet?
This morning.
Okay, on to serious matters. Who is the New Nation Party and what does it stand for? Who is your audience?
Our audience is the silent majority of New Zealand, the people whose voices people feel aren't being heard. We started a year ago or so as a way of bringing together grassroots candidates, getting people who have common sense, practical knowledge of how the world works and who want to make a difference. So that's what we were created for.
What is the single biggest issue in Tauranga that's so important you would die in a ditch over?
Oh, wow, die in a ditch over. Transport. When, as a councillor, we surveyed the public in Tauranga, transport and parking were number 1 and 2 in every survey. Things like museums were right down between 8 and 10, and things like other amenities, like doing up the city centre was not even on the list, it didn't feature. Transport and parking. I would suggest that dying in a ditch would be to make our city function and make the port function without disrupting our normal freedom of movement, if you like.
Tauranga grinds to a halt every rush hour, but nowhere near enough people want to take the bus. It's just not even an option. Can we afford to just keep building more and more roads? Where's the line there?
The issue with public transport in our city, first of all, is the way that the setup is done. The buses are not run by our council. They're run by the regional council. They've set it up in a way that means that for where I lived in Bellevue, it would take me an hour and a half to get to the Mount, which outside of rush hour is about a 20-minute drive. And that's the competition. To go from Bayfair to the lakes, my kids who have driver's licenses drive themselves because of the time it takes. They don't want to go to the city centre. They want to go from mall to mall. They want to go from shopping for clothes in Bayfair to the movies in the lakes. So instead of taking the bus, they can't take one car because of restricted licenses. They all take their cars. The bus system is a failure. And we know that because no one uses it. And we know the reason why. Tauranga was built for cars. There is no way to retrofit buses and cycleways and force people into public transport. It cannot happen. We need bigger roads, and we can go up if we need to. We've already got the flyover at Hewlett's Road, and we're going to get a flyover at the B2B at Bayfair. We need bigger roads.
Youth crime is in the news a lot these days. What's the solution?
Well, first of all, we have to look at what the cause is. In my opinion, the cause is a breakdown in family values over generations. There's been a breakdown in policing. We don't have bobbies on the beat anymore, which, if that was a case, that there were police walking around and actually looking for those little areas of our city that are being tagged, which is I guess a gateway crime, through to the illicit drug use and things that are happening in the background, through to broken windows and stolen items and violence. We haven't set up the framework to get that right. We don't have the support options. We've got a lot of independent groups that are doing things, and we hear that there's funding available, but a lot of those groups are working on the smell of an oily rag. We haven't set it up right. So we've allowed the family to break down. Our family values have broken down through our schooling, through all manner of things. We have to start there. But in the interim, we have to have more enforcement, more police presence in those areas of our city that are dangerous at the moment.
Do you agree with the government's COVID policy?
No.
Why?
The stats don't back it up. Yes, it was a pretty bad thing that wiped out 6 million people, 5.5 million people around the world over 2 years. 2009, we lost 2 million people, and about every 20 years there's a disease comes through that hits us. For centuries and millennia, humans have survived against these diseases. For the first time in history, governments have locked down healthy people under quarantine. There's no point locking healthy people under quarantine, and the stats show that if you're under 50 and you're fit and healthy and live a reasonably healthy life, the worst thing that happens is you get a bit sick from COVID. The chance of death under 50 was minuscule. You had higher chances of dying in a car crash. So no, I don't think that mandating masks, for example, mandating vaccines, the government will say, well, nobody put a gun to your head. Well, if you were going to lose your job, if you didn't get a vaccine, then that is the same thing as putting a gun to your head. And mandates on anything should stop. We have a Bill of Rights that stops a government from medicating us, from us having to be force medicated. In this instance, I think we came perilously close to breaching that Bill of Rights.
But NZ has had less deaths per population than any other developed country in the world. So how is that a bad response?
Well, it's not a bad response, but we're an island nation. We can just shut down people with disease coming in. We can just go, no more people, and shut it down, which we did.
So what about people that are older 50, like your grandparents, your parents?
Sure.
What about them?
We all take personal responsibility for our own health, typically. Our elderly, and my mother is in her 70s now, she'll hate me for saying so, she gets to make the decision whether she wears a mask, whether she thinks that the disease is high enough or strong enough to stay at home and ask her family members to bring her food or groceries or things like that. We've got the opportunity to do that and look after our elderly how we see fit, and more importantly, how they want to be looked after. In places around the world, for example in New York, sick elderly people were collected together and exacerbated the issue over there. In New Zealand, I think we do a great job at looking after our elderly in the main. There's obviously issues with that. But as far as COVID and other respiratory diseases go, in a normal year, 3,500 New Zealanders will die of some kind of respiratory condition. In a normal year. We don't know what the numbers are over the last 2 years. We do know that it's a really unfortunate thing that sometimes people will die. Emphysema and COPD are the two biggest killers of our elderly. Respiratory disease is just one part of that. Would COVID have come through and killed tens of thousands of people like the modelling suggested? And the answer is no, it's unlikely. The background behind this doesn't stack to the response. What we did is we cracked a walnut with a sledgehammer, and I think of the number of small business owners that are now out of work and out of business, the tourism industry that has been smashed to pieces. I know of many people in tourism who have lost their businesses and their livelihoods. I don't know of anyone who's lost their houses over it or house over it.
Do you know anyone that's lost their life over COVID?
I don't, but I've heard of people who have. And when I say lost their life over COVID, that's not quite true. Oftentimes with mental health, it doesn't display until there's a disaster or an upheaval of some kind. COVID was definitely an upheaval. It removed all of our ability to socialise. There is no possible way to substitute a knees-to-knees conversation with somebody with a Zoom call. It's not reasonable for that. You lose all of your body language communication that we have, closeness, touch. Not being able to shake hands at the beginning of a meeting or give somebody a hug for a period of up to 2 years, depending on which part of New Zealand you were in, was just an abhorrence. It was a response that was overbearing and totally unreasonable. Were there parts of it that were okay? Yes. I think locking the borders was a good idea. Having people flooding in, bringing extra disease points in, it's a good idea to slow that down. MIQ, sure, that was a good idea. But we're past it. There's no reason to be in an orange setting. There's no reason to have mask mandates. COVID is done. We will get through our next cold and flu season with little effect, and then we'll be back into a summer season where everybody's fit and healthy again, and we're away.
You were removed from TCC, Tauranga City Council, along with the other elected members. You stood in a Western Bay election but didn't get elected. Is that MP material?
Yes. I've been through probably the worst that a councillor can go through in the sense of a lack of democracy. I've seen what happens when the system makes a decision without all the evidence and without the understanding and to follow an agenda. The answer is yes. I've lived through it, I understand it, I recognise it now, and I've studied the process. The process was used in a deliberate way to remove us as councillors, to put in a Labour-led commission.
And last but not least, tell us about yourself in 60 seconds or under. So, just about yourself. These seconds count. Oh,
these seconds count, right. Look, I'm a family man. I share care with my family. I've got 4 kids. One's fully grown, one's left school, and 2 more at school. I run a small business in the city here and employ a number of people. We have a branch in Christchurch, I'm passionate about the things that matter to this city. I'm passionate about transport. Fix the Bloody Road was a campaign that I happily won, although it took 3 years for the government to wake up to that. I want the best for this city. Opening the Mount Base track was one. That for me it allowed people in wheelchairs and women with prams to enjoy the same place that I was enjoying. I want to see the people of the city have a voice and get things done, not just build palaces in the centre of town in the hope that it'll bring people back after they've sent people out to the suburbs by building 9 shopping centres in a city of 150,000. You want to know why the place is dead? That's the reason. And I'm passionate about that. I want to see this city thrive, and it's got nothing to do with building edifices and stadiums. It's about getting people around the place to do what it is that they want to do when they want to do it.